Every time, there we are. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's meeting of Chongwon Borough Council's Plans Committee, held on Thursday, the 17th of July, 2025. Please, could I ask everyone present to turn off your mobile phones or switch them to silent to ensure the meeting is distraction-free. And would you do this now, please? Thank you. May I remind all those present that this meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel, and that by attending the meeting, you are giving your consent to being filmed. A notice with further information the public gallery. Under body's regulations, this meeting, and this is out. For those watching the live stream, officer presentation has been published on the website for those who wish to view it, and can be found on the agenda page for Plans Committee for the 17th of July 2025. Speakers will be called forward at the appropriate time and will have 3 minutes to speak. When 1 minute of time is remaining, they will be advised by the Democratic Services Officer, Ms. Dobson. I would also like to welcome this evening Mr. Max Howarth, our legal advisor for tonight. Welcome again, Mr. Howarth. Item 1, apologies. Ms. Dobson, have we received any apologies?
I confirm we've received an apology from Councillor Matthews, and Councillor Seaton will be substitute. And we've also received an apology from Councillor Taylor-Durant, and Councillor Good will be substitute.
Thank you. So welcome, Councillor Seaton and Councillor Good. Nice to have you with us again. Item 2, minutes of previous meeting. We've all seen a copy of the minutes of the previous meeting, which took place on the 19th of June and was mercifully short. So is the committee happy to confirm as a correct record the minutes of that meeting held on the 19th of June, please? Could I say show of hands? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting have been confirmed as a correct record, and I will sign them at the end of the meeting. Item 3, questions under committee procedure 12.8. Ms. Dobson, have we received any questions?
I confirm no questions have been received.
Thank you. Item 4, disclosure of pecuniary and personal interests. Ms. Dobson, have we received any disclosures of interest, please?
Confirm I've received a declaration of interest from Councillor Snart in relation to item 5B, P231963/2, Bencliffe Hay Cottage, Sharpley Hill, Newtown, Linford, as he is a ward councillor for the area and is acquainted with the applicant, and therefore feels he does not have an open mind. He will therefore leave the room during the consideration of this item. Councillor Good has declared an interest in item 5C, P240327/2, Brookside, Brands Lane, Loughborough. She has submitted an objection letter regarding this application, and therefore she will not be taking part in the debate and will sit in the public gallery during the consideration of this item. And also Councillor Corey Lowesley has called in item 5C, P240327/2, Brookside, Brands Lane, Loughborough, and will be speaking on the item and will therefore sit in the public gallery during the consideration of the item.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Members, are there any other disclosures of interest that members wish to make, please? Thank you. Move on. So item 5, planning applications. So would those who are going to move or leave the room? No, not for this one, what I'm talking about. We're coming to item 5, planning application, item 5A, number P stroke 25 stroke 0824 stroke 2, 42 Parklands Drive, Loughborough. And Mr. Worley, I believe you're going to take us through this. When you're ready. We have a technical hitch. There will be a brief interval. Just chat amongst yourselves. Mr. Worley, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, everyone. So the first item is a relatively small-scale application for a domestic extension, and it's before you tonight because it's caught by an element of the Constitution that requires applications by officers and members of the council to come to committee. That's the sole reason. The application is in Parklands Drive, 42 Parklands Drive, which is a fairly typical suburban street. It's a semi-detached house, the left-hand side as you look at it from the street. Just a few photos to illustrate. The proposal is a fairly sizable single-storey flat-roofed extension, which is depicted there in blue. As you can see, extending the full width of the plot and about 6 metres deep. Here's just some photos of the property, very typical of the area. That's the same diagram in a bit more detail, plan form, pitched against the existing floor layout. So you can see from there the extent further to which it's coming out, the 6 metres to which I referred, on both boundaries. So the issues as we see them is that the principle of development, this is sort of in the built-up area of the town, so no questions there. And the impact on residential amenity. So if I go back to that slide, there's a couple of quirks you should be aware of in that to the right-hand side of the, as we're looking at it now, to the right-hand side, you'll be able to pick up some double doors. And they're almost directly opposite double doors, or a window rather, in the facing house. And normally we'd be very worried about that, but in this case they already replicate a window that's in the same location at the moment, so we don't consider that to be a worsening of the situation. In terms of still staying on the right, in the terms of that length along the boundary, in certain circumstances that can be problematic too, but in this case this is where the gap between the semis exists, and indeed the house next door has a garage that runs alongside this flank wall, approximately where the word proposed is on the screen, and that serves as quite an effective screen for this extension, so it really won't impact onto the house just a little further afield. On the left-hand side, similarly, we sometimes would be concerned with an extension this deep, but next door has an extension on the left-hand side that is comes out a fair distance, not the full distance of this one, but to a point whereby the projection that this one would bring is not so great as that it would affect its rear-facing windows unacceptably. There'd be an effect, but not one that breaches our rules in the means we calculate these things. And it's also advantaged in that it's south of this site, so less interference with the path of the sun as it travels through the day. So with all that in mind, just on highway safety, just to say it doesn't bring any more demand for parking because it's not extra bedrooms or anything like that, and it doesn't interfere with parking on the front where there's a couple of spaces either. So sort of status quo is retained. So on that basis, we're pleased to recommend approval with fairly conventional conditions for an application of this nature, which are listed there.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. We have no speakers for this application. So if any members of the committee would now like to speak, I have here, Councillor Fryer, please. Is there anyone else wanting to speak at the moment? So I have Councillor Fryer, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Smithers. Councillor Fryer, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have gone through the papers in quite a lot of detail. As this would not normally, an application of this type would even come to planning committee, and it is only for the reason as explained by the officer. I have no problem in recommending officer's approval under the conditions as laid out in the report. Officer's recommendation, I should say. Thank you.
Councillor Fryer, so you are the proposer
Yes,
to
I am.
accept. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second the proposal.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, really. If this extension is going across the full width of the property, how will the occupants get access to their garden? I think from what you said, the extension is going across the full width. So how do they get access from the front to the back?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Yes, they'd have to go through the extension, and hopefully you can make out on that plan where all the doors are to allow that passage from front and side through the back lounge and then through the extension as well.
Did you want to come back, Councillor O'Neill?
No, that's a pretty straightforward answer to a straightforward question, but it's not the answer I was expecting, to be honest, but thank you.
Councillor Smithers, please.
Just a question as well. I can't see very well the details of where the kitchen is. I'm assuming it's on the right, but if there's an extractor fan, is that going to go into next door's property with their habitable room? So I just wondered where the extractor fans might be for a kitchen blowing out into somebody else's property, with it being so wide.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. We don't have that level of detail. It's a matter for the building regulations first and foremost, but there's plenty of opportunity from this plan because rearwards is their own garden. To the right, it's the garden of the adjacent property with the garage next to it, so not right into their windows or open doors or anything like that. And I would suggest just avoid the left-hand side. Well, to be honest, on most of the left-hand side, they couldn't put an extractor fan in because it would be cheap barge with next door's extension. So there's not really much scope.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I note that there's no representations or objections to this planning application. Yeah, could I just ask through you, the officers, what about the bin storage? Will that be on the front of the property, or is there some way that they're going to with the bin storage? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Start. I'll leave this plan up a little bit longer so you can see we're looking at the plan on the right is reading from back to front, bottom to top. So you can see there, although it occupies the full width further back, the existing passageway up the side of the house is 3/4 kept intact. And so there's plenty of room there for bins.
Thank you, Chair. It's really just an observation. Living in a house that's not dissimilar to that, they will rule the day when a wheelbarrow has to go through the house and come out of the other side, or when there's a children's party or something like that. But I have coped with it for over 40 years, so it is manageable.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Now, I did hear a voice saying, I would like to second this. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Seaton. So, we have a proposer and a seconder to accept officer's recommendation for this application. So all those in favour, please may I see a show of hands?
That's unanimous, Chair, so the motion is carried.
Thank you for that. We come now to the next item on our agenda, which is item, let Councillor Snart remove himself. We come now to item 5B, number P/23/1963/2, Bencliffe Hay Cottage, Sharpley Hill, Newton, Linford. Again, I would say we have no speakers for this application. So can we come straight to you, please, Mr. Worley? I believe you're going to take when you're ready, please.
Thanks again, Chair, and through you. Yeah, this is an application to change the use of some redundant stables in the countryside, about as middle as nowhere that you can get within the context of Charnwood, but I think it's fair to say more properly about a mile or so north of Newton Linford. Plan kind of illustrates the point. There's almost nothing on the location plan except the site itself. So for those of you that weren't on the site visit this afternoon, the road going up the right of that slide is Sharpley Hill, and this site with the red rectangle is way down the private drive, which is the grey road horizontal across that slide. What they propose to do is convert the existing stable block, which is the left to right part of the diagram shown there, but also to extend it, and the extensions would be comprised in those two sort of north-south, as we're looking at it on this plan, projections to the rear. The significance of the red line on this plan is that that's the intended defined residential curtilage, and that's been something that's been negotiated through the application process so that there can be no doubt like where garden begins and ends and where open countryside begins and ends. So that will exert some control that domestic use and paraphernalia can't just grow and spread across the countryside. It would all have to be contained within that red line, which, as you see, is drawn very tightly around the building. That's the building as it is now and as we saw it earlier. This is the ground floor plan. It is only proposed to be ground floor. And you can see again there the relative scale of the rear extensions, which is the two projecting wings pointing up this slide compared to the existing house. In dimensions terms, they're about 6 metres long. And as you can see, quite narrow and separated by, to create a courtyard, which will be garden area. This is the design. They propose to completely retain the existing building, no demolition whatsoever, but augment it with mainly glazing to fill in what at the moment are open arches and doorways and the central arch in order to make it habitable space. And those diagrams show that, and also show the extent of the rear of those rear wings. The annotation's far too small on this plan, but if you could see it, what you would read is that the materials are going to be a continuation of what's already there. So that's for those of us, those that were with us today, that's a shiplap finish and like a wooden hazel tile, mosaic roof tiles. So just more of the same, in other words, except where punctuated by the roof lights. So the issues around this, bit more substance to this one. So the principle of development brings us to one of those situations where we're pulled in two directions at once. And that's the reason it's before you tonight. So, and that, what I mean by that is the old policies that still live with us and will do until they're entirely replaced. So that's the local plan back to 2004 and the core strategy of 2015. Do not support a development of this nature. But the new policy body, which is the MPBF as it currently stands, and our own emerging local plan, which, as you all know, is very close to fruition, are very supportive of a scheme like this. So we're in a position of having to pitch old versus new, and like in the spirit of lots of what we have to do about keeping up to date, we consider the combined weight of the new policy set outweighs the old policy set as it disappears into the distance, especially the 2004 plan. That's older than some of our staff. So, in terms of the actual impacts at a local level, again, the site visit was very valuable. You can, those that went would recognise that it's tucked away in a clearing, surrounded on 3 sides by trees and additional tree cover on the 4th side. It's almost in a clearing in the forest. So almost no landscape impact whatsoever because those trees block views in and out, basically. In terms of impact of the surrounding woodland, what we mean by that is ecological impact on the surrounding woodland. So 2 points I'd like to mention there. Firstly, it's a good distance from the nearest trees, 15 metres. And there is within the application file a tree impact assessment and method statement for construction, which is a package of protective measures for the trees closest to the proposed construction, which is one of the extensions in this case. And the tree officer is quite happy that they're adequate. In the recommendation, that's reflected in conditions. But the other dimension to this is concerns about light spill from all that glazing that I mentioned into the ecosystem that the forest supports. So there's no certainty it will be a problem. So we've crafted a condition that requires that this is tested out, and if it is a problem, some mitigation measures come forward for our approval. So that might be like darkened glass. You can get various products that prevent light spill from and through windows and things like that. So an assessment that we would then have to be satisfied with. And lastly, and by no means least, because it's the most complicated bit of this, the protected species. So what they discovered with this building is there are actually bats actually living there at present, and therefore they need to go through a regime governed by Natural England to get a license to relocate these bats. So the challenge for us as a planning committee is to be aware of that, but not to try and replicate those powers. You know, one of the golden rules of planning is not to tread on the toes of other regimes. But what we do have to do is make sure that we're not setting them up for a fall, basically, by granting permission that we then know that they couldn't be, that they couldn't implement. So there's a body of text in the report that explains how we've explored where they stand in terms of their licence, that they're likely to get it. We don't know for certain until they apply that they're likely to get it. So nothing we will be doing this evening will clash with their responsibilities under different legislation. So on this one, another recommendation for approval, a suite of conditions. I've mentioned some of them already. The normal stuff, removing permitted development so it stays a conversion in the manner that I've presented it tonight. The tree protection that I've mentioned, the biodiversity enhancement, which is proposals for within the land holding, the forest around the property, and the light spillage that I mentioned, which we think can be adequately tested and controlled if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. We have no speakers, public speakers, so I have Councillor Fryer. Is there anyone else at the moment who? Councillor Seaton, thank you. Anyone else? Right, Councillor Fryer, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much to the officer and for the very full report in our documents and for his presentation. I was on site today and we all had a very good look round. I think it's well designed because except for the glazing and things like that, it would virtually look the same. It's not encroaching to any of the existing woodland. I was very interested to see that the applicant, who is the owner of the site, but is, by the reading it, is very much engaged in woodland preservation enhancement. That's his business. That's 2.4 on page 19. But also when we walked down, because the bus coach could not get down the long drive, which was on the plan, we walked down, and I was most impressed to see how many nesting boxes were already just on that drive. Nearly every main tree had a nesting box for one type or other of the bird. So I have full confidence. It's not encroaching onto the woodland at all. The gardening or the green bit will be at the front, and the rest of the garden is contained within the two wings to make like a courtyard. So I have no problem in recommending we accept the officer's recommendation, subject to the conditions he's laid out, particularly with view to the glazing to make sure it meets the standards and the light pollution. I think they're very full content things. And I find it very interesting that there are no speakers and no objectors. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fryer. Councillor Seaton, please.
Put this on, although I don't need it. Just a few comments. If the building was a working stable, it would generate far more traffic than it will do as a domestic house. The stables, although I wasn't on the trip today and I'm just going by photos, I would think they're not suitable today for the standards of housing horses or stabling horses. So work would have to be carried out on there. Just my last comment is it's symmetrical, which pleases me immensely, and it's being converted with such sensitivity to the surrounding areas. So thank you.
Councillor Seaton, does any other member of the committee wish to speak, please? Councillor Goad, please.
I really like the provision for the light spillage there. I'm slightly worried about the amount of glazing and birds hitting windows, so I'm hoping that they are aware of that, because I know what it's like when birds hit your windows. It's not that pleasant, and if there's that much glass there, they could be attacked from every side.
Do you wish to comment, Mr. Worley, or do we note Councillor Good's contribution?
Yes, I think so. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Good? I'm going to move to the vote then, colleagues. We have to accept officer's recommendation for well, actually, what will be a lovely building at Newton Linford. So can I show of hands, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair, so the motion is carried.
Thank you. Could somebody ask Councillor Snart to come back in? Right, very well, colleagues. We come now to item 5C, number P/0327/2, Brookside, Browns Lane, Loughborough. Councillor Corey, Losley and Councillor Good are in the public gallery. So I'm going to turn to our planning officer, Ms. Walker, and you're going to take us through this, Ms. Walker, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The application proposes the demolition of an existing building and some felling of some trees. The proposal is for the construction of a new 167 bed purpose-built student accommodation. The application we're considering at the moment is a deferral from the 17th of April, where it was understood that one of the trees, the willow tree, hadn't been surveyed. So the application was deferred for that reason. We now have a revised tree impact assessment, which fully considers the willow tree that was missed off. The landscape scheme has also been amended to show the willow tree, and it's shown to be retained. There's also, within the landscape scheme, which has been slightly amended, some trees from the southwestern corner have been moved further along the brook and over to the eastern side of the site. And this was just from advice from the tree officer, so that the new trees didn't compete with the large tree on the southwestern corner that's actually outside the site. And due to these changes, we've had a revised BNG metric, which actually shows a net loss, an increased net loss. We've also received a pre and post habitat plans, just to see, so we can actually measure that loss. Sorry, bear with me a second. Okay, yeah, sorry. Also, in the extras report from the deferral meeting on the 17th of April, we asked the Conservation Officer to review the viewpoints in the TVA that had been submitted. This has taken place, and review of the TVA has taken place. But it's been confirmed that the TVA, is very different from the heritage impact assessment. And so we have, the viewpoints within the TVA, and that demonstrates where the development can be seen from, and the impacts on visual amenity. Whereas the assessment of heritage impact is actually contained in the supporting heritage statement. There is a full rundown of comments that have been received in the extras report, which I'm just coming to now. Oh, just one second. Also, for the in the update report, some of the conditions, once we reviewed them, they have been amended slightly, mainly for points of clarification. So we have, and the amended conditions, well, all the conditions are actually listed in the update report, just for ease of reading for everybody. And they're actually in bold, the amendments are in bold text, so that you can actually compare and contrast from the main report that's in the deferred report. So we have a new condition just for hard surfacing to be submitted for approval. And the landscaping scheme is to be secured by condition, because that's now been agreed. Condition 32 has been fully scripted now. There was, initially we considered as officers we should maybe condition the management plan that had been submitted with the application, the student management plan. But it was decided on looking, through the police designing out crime officer comments, that we can ask for submission of details to how the development will achieve a secured by design award. And there is a link that's provided for the applicant as a guide for that. So we have an extras report that you should have before you, following the publication of the update report. It's just slightly confusing because there's quite a few reports, but the extras report is following the publication of the update, the most recent one. So we've had concern raised about missing viewpoints, and the council's urban design and conservation officer has made full consideration now in an assessment of the viewpoints for the setting of the Grade 2 listed buildings and heritage overall. And that is actually contained in the extras report. There's also concern about amenity and overbearing impacts, and the concerns are raised there. Consideration and a full assessment was made of amenity in the main report from the 17th of April. And it was considered at that time that, the application did accord with the design guide and with planning policy. And that's found at Appendix 1. The biodiversity officers had requested further conditions. However, having reviewed their comments, officers believe there's no further conditions required, because the biodiversity condition will be imposed, which is a standard condition, and the Section 106 will secure off-site net gain, and an informative will be added just to remind the developer that this needs to be adhered to. So turning to the site's actually located in the heart of Loughborough. You can see it's quite small there, but it's actually, in the heart of Loughborough itself. Just bear with me a second. So the site location plan shows the site outlined in red, as we'd expect to see. The site is located in the built-up area of Loughborough. As you can see, there's buildings all around, and it's close to the town centre, and considered to be in a sustainable location for that reason. It makes use of a partly brownfield site, and the redevelopment of the site for a purpose-built student accommodation will contribute towards the economic and social cultural growth of Loughborough. In terms of policy context, the national and local planning policy supports student-built accommodation in sustainable locations. This is the aerial view of the site, just to show the site in context with its surroundings. You can see the leisure centre is over to the west, and there are student blocks to the south of the site existing. Over to the east of the site, there's a mix of residential residential uses and some commercial uses within the old residential form. And over to the north is the Queen's Park. The Queen's Park. The site is located in the Manuel Church Conservation Area, and it's located in a flood zone 2, apart from a small section of the site which is located in flood zone 3B, which is very close to the access. So this is a plan that shows the extent of the buildings to be demolished on the site. As you can see, currently we have a dwelling which sits reasonably close to the access, close to Browns Lane, and there are 3 buildings. They're single-storey buildings, but they're all to be demolished. The garages to the front and over to the side that actually front Browns Lane will be retained. Sorry. This is the proposed layout plan, which I thought would be useful just to talk through. It shows the footprint of the building, and this building the footprint of the building has been reduced through the planning process. And the reason it was reduced was from advice from the tree officer, because on the east elevation, there's a very large tree. I haven't actually got anything to point with, but there's a large tree on the east elevation, and the building was reduced quite significantly so that tree can be retained. The plan indicates amenity open spaces within the site, and those amenity spaces will be along the brook, and they'll be hard standing areas. There are cycle stores within the actual building itself, and also the refuse is also contained within the building, the refuse storage areas. And it's proposed to have 100 enclosed and secure cycle storage within it. There are 2 parking spaces proposed to the eastern side, where the site projects slightly on the plan there. One of those spaces will be for staff and one will be a disabled space. There's also, as the site is actually, or the proposal is going to be, have no cars on site. There's also a delivery area proposed with the hard standing, so that's accessed from the Browns Lane with a hard standing area at the front, to the front. At the ground floor, there's a mix of communal uses, including the reception area to the front. The layout plan also indicates distances from the residential properties, and they can be obviously viewed, but reference has been made to those in the relevant section of the report. There'll be a number of trees lost along the brook and some within the site. However, the landscape scheme will be secured by condition, and that provides extensive tree planting and other soft planting as well. So turning to townscape matters, just an image of some of the buildings in the locality. You can see there's quite a mix. So I thought it would be useful to talk through some of the heights of the buildings in the locality, and you can see them, hopefully you can see them on the plan there in their colour form, and they are in the report themselves as well. So there is a mix of properties in terms of height in the area, going up to the Emmanuel Church, which is 40 metres, and the Carlington Tower, which is 46 metres. There's other ranges, as you would expect to see in a town centre, ranging between 10 and 13 and 6 and 10 metres. So we have actually had a townscape and visual impact assessment submitted with the application. And sorry, just looking at viewpoint 1, I just thought it'd be useful just to sort of work through the viewpoints that have been offered, just to help sort of have gain an understanding. So viewpoint 1, you can see on the top right image the church extension, and then you can also see where that viewpoint has been taken from. And you can then on the bottom left, you can see an image of the building proposed in place, screened by trees, and set some distance away from the church. Viewpoint 2 shows the existing 4-storey building. That's the student beehive blocks, which bound the car park to the north of the site. The tip of the building, you can see, the highest point actually will just be seen over the ridge of the existing building. And again, the existing landscaping and established trees do offer the softening approach to this viewpoint. So viewpoint 3, this is taken from the footpath adjacent to Wood Brook and from the entrance of the Loughborough Leisure Centre. And while, it may be considered here that, the building seems to sit very close to the edge of the site here, I think we need to look at it with the actual, the layout plan, because it actually sits much further back from that. And we can go back to that layout plan if necessary. So viewpoint 4, this is taken from a local footpath and from the cycle route which runs adjacent to the Brook and Browns Lane and connects to the university. The building will be evident in this view, but the retained trees will offer the screen and reduce the harm. It has been noted from the urban design officer that this viewpoint and having a building in this area will potentially help with security and the use of that footpath. So this viewpoint here is from Forest Road, from the junction, as you go into the town centre, and you can see the residential property on the corner there. The top right-hand image shows the area without the building, and you can see the building on the bottom left. Again, well, you can actually see the building from this site, from this area, but the mass will be actually set back from the road, and the trees are maintained along that boundary will form a frame of soft landscaping. Again, it's considered here that, you know, this will form a good frontage in terms of urban design to Browns Lane. So this is an image here. I just thought it would be useful to show. It just demonstrates how the building would appeal from the site frontage. The lower level entrance is the reception area, and will be partially screened by trees. And again, this creates an active frontage in terms of urban design. And so we have an active frontage whilst also retaining that kind of leafy character along Browns Lane. Viewpoint 8, this is taken from the Queen's Park, and it is actually taken in close proximity from that viewpoint there. Again, the development here will be visible, but again, it's actually broken. The proposal is actually broken up into layers. So whilst you can see the highest point of the building there are the footprint of the building actually drops down. Again, very well screened from this viewpoint from the existing soft landscaping. This is just a comparison for you. So we have the existing building, 2-storey, with a gable fronting to Browns Lane. And this is a photo montage prepared by the applicant to show the proposed building, which is the reception area. Again, similar scale to the existing building, and you can see the block raising up, but that is actually pushed much further back. So in terms of townscape, it's acknowledged that the proposal will have some negative, negative impact on the landscape and visual impact upon the existing landscape character. But in terms of mitigation, the proposed layered approach to the building massing has been used to introduce low wings to reduce the height and the overall scale when appeared from the wider areas. And it's relatively low when you actually look at the whole area and how it's been assessed. The soft landscaping proposals seek to visually integrate the proposed development with the surrounding, will open up views on the west, which will be viewed as an integral part of the existing townscape. So it kind of starts to form into the townscape itself. Turning to heritage assets, just thought it worth having a shot here of the site and its relationship with the extent of the Emmanuel Church conservation area. And there's also some prominent buildings there, so 1, 2 and 3, but they will come a little bit later. So again, just thought it'd be useful to show where the listed buildings are on this key. So you can see building 1 is the church, which is to the way, quite far away to the south east. And then we have Forest Road, Grade 2 listed building. Again, you can see on the key there, that's number 2. And then we have some locally listed building, which is the chapel. Again, that's on Forest Road, and that's shown as number 3. So we also have a conservation area adjacent to the site, which is Queen's Park Conservation Area. And there are some Grade 2 listed buildings within the conservation area. You can see here from the plan, the site to the south, just so we could illustrate the conservation area extent. So there are 2 listed buildings within this conservation area and 2 locally listed buildings. So one is the Carlington Tower, and there's the library building as well. And then there's Mill Building and number 18 Devonshire Square. So just a little bit of history on the tower. I don't feel the need to run through that completely, but I think it's just to provide some context in terms of its significance. So here is some of the impacts considered of the tower and the setting of the tower. So you can see here there's a red line. That's not actually the height of the building, just to reassure everybody. That's to show the context of the width of the building. And so you can see the Carlington Tower on the left, and you can see the church on the right. But again, based on the impact assessment, the town centre impact assessment, that you only have glimpse views of the building over the top of the existing student accommodation. This shows a view from the park area and with the tower, and you can see, hopefully you can see from the image but also from the photograph taken, you know, that you can, like I said, you can actually see this building in the context of the tower, and the tower is Grade 2 listed, so therefore, you know, we have to consider that. But I think based on the distance of the building here from this view of the tower and the amount of soft landscaping, there would just be glimpse views of the new building in the setting of the tower. So aspects of heritage harm. The views of the tower from the Park Road junction are significant views within the conservation area, and the proposal has the potential to impact on this view. We have been out and visited that part of the of Loughborough this afternoon. It's considered that there will be no harm on the other heritage assets on the Emmanuel Church or 14 Forest Road. The NPPF makes it clear that when a development will result in less, just going back a step, the conservation officer has identified a less than substantial harm for this development, but that's on the lower end of that harm. And so if there is a harm identified, the NPPF at paragraph 215, you know, makes it clear that if there is a less than substantial harm, then we have to weigh the harm against the public benefits. And the public benefits are considered. Bear with me a second. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, we have looked at the public benefits here in line with the NPPF. And officers consider that the improvement in natural surveillance of a widely used pedestrian cycle route to the west of the site that links the town centre and university, and from the entrance of the leisure centre, will actually be an improvement and an enhancement to public benefit. The potential to free up family homes, because the HMO use is likely to be in less demand if we have an actual student accommodation block, purpose-built student accommodation. The visual improvements to the built environment along Browns Lane is considered to be a public benefit here, It's currently underused, and this will reinforce the landscape along Browns Lane, promoting Loughborough University. Continued provision of the economic growth of the town centre, with having students very close to the town centre, to ensure the town centre remains viable shopping place, activity, and the footfall to the edge of the town centre is also promoted. In terms of the key considerations, they are all listed in the main report and fully considered, but just to briefly run through them with you this evening. So the principle of this development is considered to be acceptable. It's in a sustainable location and is supported by, and the student accommodation, purpose-built student accommodation, is supported by local and national policy. In terms of the need for student accommodation, each application is treated on its own merits in terms of need, but this will be a managed purpose-built accommodation, and the new local plan, the new emerging local plan, actually is more restrictive on HMOs, so therefore there's likely to be a need going ahead and going forward for more purpose-built student accommodation. In terms of design, an impact on the townscape, there has been some identified harm, but over time, in terms of the landscape, over time it's considered that the development will soften and it will sit appropriately within the changing landscape of Loughborough. In terms of heritage, again, there has been some identified harm, and this is considered to be less than substantial. And the public benefits are set out in the report, and they are considered to tip the balance. Landscaping, a landscaping scheme will be secured by condition, and this has a prime aim of planting trees along the brook and within the site area. In terms of open space, an off-site contributions are sought, and this has been agreed by the applicant and will be secured by Section 106. In terms of residential amenity, amenity has been addressed in the main body of the report from the 17th of April, and it is a full and comprehensive assessment. The development is situated in appropriate distance and in accordance with the design guide. There is a slight shortfall on the southwestern boundary, but this actually faces an existing student accommodation where amenity is approached slightly different in policy terms. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, as I mentioned earlier, there has been an identified loss, and it's been agreed that off-site credits will be purchased and they will be secured by the Section 106, and there will be conditions imposed for protected species such as hedgehogs, swifts and bats. There are separate conditions, and you can see those in the update report. In terms of flood and drainage, no objections have been raised from the Environment Agency or from the LLFA, which deals with drainage. This is subject to conditions. The Highway and Transportation team have raised no objections to the scheme, and there are off-site works proposed to ensure that the cycle links are maintained, and so you can link one side of the site to the other, so we have access to the university using cycles. So based on the assessment in the reports that you have before you, and hopefully full consideration is taken of those, it's recommended by officers that the application is approved, subject to securing obligations through the Section 106 and conditions being imposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Walker. Now we do have a number of speakers for this application. I'll run through them. Gillian Lewis to speak on behalf of Ed Lewis. Do we have Ms Lewis? Thank you. Mark Horsnell, the applicant. Thank you. Dr. Steve Bullman from Storm Residents Association. Thank you, Dr. Bullman. And Councillor Rees Corey Lowesley. Thank you. I will take them in that order. So, Ms. Lewis, if you'd like to come forward. You have 3 minutes to speak. And Ms Dobson will tell you when you have 1 minute remaining. So please, when you're ready.
My wife and I own 9 Forest Road, where we live with our 2 young children. I am speaking on behalf of 26 properties. That's 74% of the conservation area assigned the neighbours and residents of Emmanuel Conservation Development Controls. With the scale and impact of the proposed development, we're disappointed at the lack of official objections, considering the numerous policy and guideline violations. Collectively, our biggest disappointment is the lack of adherence to guidelines and policies of conservation area. When we bought the property, we did so knowingly, taking on the responsibility as custodians to protect the area for future generations. It is concerning that CBC does not appear to take their responsibility seriously. Being in a conservation area should mean the area is conserved in full, as per the boundaries. Why should being on the edge of the area make this particular managed green space any less valuable? It's not a circular buffer or protection around a single point of heritage which dissipates with distance. We are also concerned about the disregard of conservation area with the planning application document themselves. Conservation area appraisal, page 11, specifically picks out key view of Carillon from Park Road to Forest Road. The current process will radically impact this key scene. Beyond the impact to a protected conservation area, numerous other guidelines and policies need to be broken or bent to allow the current planned development to go ahead. Of the numerous agencies who comment in section 7 of the planning report, 6 consultees note some form of policy or guideline violation, yet none raised an objection. Any situation where so many rules need to be broken for a bill to occur surely requires objection. To highlight a few which impact the potential safety of future building occupants, local residents and wildlife. Built in flood-risk areas flooded twice in the last 12 months. There are more suitable areas not in flood zones. Building overbearing structures, contrary to the Emmanuel Conservation Area appraisal document, proposed new development must take into account the scale of the existing buildings and does not dominate to overwhelm them, which this plan objectively does. Net biodiversity loss, development of gardens, removal of large mature planting. Applicants suggested using the Emmanuel Church car park, but they have not given permission for this. Proximity, less than 17 metres from the vulnerable resident in Huston Court, hasn't been considered. The centrally located conservation area is a family area, brings with it street maintenance, character, decorations at Christmas. As local residents, we are not against development, but respectfully request committee to enforce the rules and guidelines mentioned in the development plan, policies ensuring that any development is in keeping and an asset to the conservation area, and to therefore refuse the current oversized application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lewis. Mr. Mark Horsnell, please. Again, Mr. Horsnell, you have 3 minutes. Ms. Dobson will tell you when you have a minute left. When you're ready, please.
I'm Mark Horsnell, Director of Solar Homes, who will be the owner and developer of this site. Solar Homes is a family-run business based in Charnwood, employing a number of local staff and a large number of local companies on our projects. The majority of our projects are in Charnwood, so we really care about the area and quality of the buildings we deliver. Over the years, we have invested in excess of 50 million into Charnwood for our developments. We have an excellent track record working closely with Charnwood Regeneration Team with our prestigious project, award-winning projects in Loughborough, Waterside Village down by the canal and train station. There, we've broken the mould of what people are looking for with our live, work, play model, providing top quality homes where residents can live. work and socialise from home. We have the same vision for Browns Lane, delivering top quality accommodation and facilities similar to Woodside Village. Browns Lane will create a seamless route for students from graduation, retain them in the town through Woodside Village and onto local employment for the benefit of the local economy. This is a huge opportunity for Charnwood to set a new benchmark for the future of student accommodation better than the current offering there is in town. We do not see any local developers putting this level of investment into this town, trying to deliver this vision and making Charnwood a better place to work, study and live. The benefits, the application represents real local benefits as outlined in the planner's report. It releases town centre family homes, uses student houses back into the community. The plan report suggests up to 70 homes will be released back into the community. This is really significant given the current drive and additional family houses to buy and rent needed to buy and rent locally. These blocks are fully managed, so largely eliminate antisocial behaviour and rubbish that isn't managed in houses. It promotes the town's university and college, bringing economic growth to the town and wider community. This end of the town is crying out for investment, with so many business closing down and empty shops. It improves the public realm, both at the entrance to the leisure centre and the vibrancy of Browns Lane, which with natural visibility over well-used cycles and footpaths. The project provides work for local people and businesses in these very challenging times, and ultimately, when complete, the building creates a number of full-time permanent jobs. We have been in planning now for 3 years and spent an absolute excessive amount of money on this application. We have amended the scheme 3 times, reduced it by 20%. We have literally jumped through every hoop that we've been asked to jump through. And as I sit here today, we have no objections from any of your internal or external consultees. Even the Heritage Officer that proposed the development will be the lower end of less than substantial harm to heritage assets. On the basis of this, we hope this scheme does go through, and we urge you to pass it tonight, because obviously we wouldn't want to go down the appeal route. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horsnell. Dr. Ballman, please. I think you know the... No. Dr. Ballman, you have 3 minutes. Ms. Dobson will tell you when you have a minute left. So please, when you're ready.
I speak for the Storey and Ashby Area Residents Group, SARG. We have decades of experience in areas of high student occupation and comparable student halls. Permission for this application is a judgment call, a balance of benefit and harm. The officer report at para 10.5 presents 5 points, which it cites as a public benefit. It says a benefit is to visual improvement to the built environment along Browns Lane. Do you agree? At 21 metres high, this will cast its shadow right across the Queen's Park Children's Playground all winter, which is why the applicant never presented a correction to their solar shading study 2 applications ago. It cites a benefit of activity and footfall to the edge of the town centre. Do you agree? This is in a residential area without parking, so parent and student cars will bring chaos to Browns Lane and Ward's End every start and end of every half term. The leisure centre will only get relief out of term. The report says it promotes Loughborough University, but the application undermines the expansion of student beds on campus that is currently being consulted on. The report states it brings potential to free up family homes in the town currently in HMO use by students, without being able to cite any evidence that this is true. It is difficult to remember how often Sarge has heard this fallacy touted. Our experience is that students like living with small groups of friends that small HMOs provide, which is why new HMOs continue to be applied for. Living with over 150 students such as this gives a very different experience. The popularity of that is shown by other developments in town which have failed to fill the student beds and started to advertise short stay accommodation like a budget hotel or an Airbnb. The officer reports that the development is at the lower end of the conservation spectrum of harm, but counts as less than substantial harm to the two conservation areas. Do you agree? This is a substantial student development, 21 metres high, outside the town centre, in a residential conservation area right beside Queen's Park. If those factors are not enough to refuse, then there is nowhere in the rest of Loughborough that is. If this is permitted, you will not be able to reject similar applications anywhere else in the town. This precedent will enable any future refusal anywhere to be appealed. Let this through and you've condemned any part of the town to be subject to more such developments. It's a matter of judgment for you. You're entitled to disagree with the opinion of the case officer. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Doctor, had you finished?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Chair. Just comment on the speaker. Just comment on the speaker. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Comment on the speaker. Yeah. Or do you want me to wait till the voice?
So I don't.
Can I comment on something Dr. Williams said, or would you like me to wait?
I was going to do that. Sorry about that, colleagues. Councillor Corey Losley, when you're ready, please. I think you know the drill.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll have seen in the report for this item, I have a number of objections to this application, which range from highway safety and parking amenity to overbearing scale and a loss of privacy, all material concerns. In the report, you'll have read a detailed breakdown of each of these issues, along with explanations on how they're deemed acceptable or how they might be given limited weight in the public planning balance. I would ask each committee member to consider how they would feel if this development was almost literally in their back garden or overlooking their property, especially when many of the immediately surrounding properties have already gone from being C3 homes to C4 HMOs in recent years. I'm sure you'd feel there's already been an impact on the character and appearance of the area, and you'd probably also feel that 6 stories appearing right behind you represents a profound acceleration of this impact. Paragraph 9.1.8 of the original April report states that policy H8 of the emerging local plan is positive in its approach to PBSAs, on the proviso that they avoid damage to the social and physical character of the local area, and importantly, H8 takes into account cumulative effects. Well, cumulative effects are here, and they're here to stay. Members would have noted that this new PBSA will in part be immediately adjacent to another existing PBSA. When it comes to social and physical character, how much more cumulative could change be than 2 of these developments jutting right up against each other? At this point, I'm sure some members are thinking that a few PBSAs are worth the overbearing impact on neighbouring properties and the town at large. Surely if it means we have some valuable houses returned to the market as C3s, as the latent demand for student properties is met by new PBSAs, then it's a lesser evil. However, in Loughborough, there is no quantifiable evidence of a causal relationship between HMOs and PBSAs that sees one declining as the other increases. Generally speaking, PBSAs are more expensive to rent than a room in a shared HMO, which inevitably precludes more budget-sensitive students. I think it's also important to say that there's a cultural predisposition among students towards living in a house in their 2nd and 3rd years. It's something of a rite of passage. I don't think it's a simple supply-demand dichotomy we're talking about here. I know the applicant supplied a letter from a Melton-based surveyor to say otherwise, but this is purely a circumstantial opinion. As yet, there's no evidence PBSAs have any bearing on the number of HMOs in town. The material concerns I raised in my recording may be deemed acceptable in the eyes of the planning authority. If we were getting flats for permanent occupation, I may even be inclined to agree that the costs are outweighed by the benefits. However, the fact that we're looking at a further and marked change to the character of the area, while only getting a reduced contribution to Charnwood housing supply, that in practice will represent no help to local people looking for somewhere to live, means that this development is just not worth it to the cost. It's just not worth the cost to the people of Loughborough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Bennett, would you like to respond to any of our speakers, please?
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for the interruption a moment ago. There's just one point I wanted to mention. I don't know whether my colleague, Ms. Walker, might want to comment on other matters, but it was really the speaker, Dr. Bullman. He did mention something, he invited members to consider the impact of this development, given that it lies within the conservation area. And just to clarify, members, for the avoidance of doubt, the application is outside of the conservation area, just to clarify that point.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Ms. Walker?
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment, if that's okay. It was noted from the speakers, we were talking about the precedence of applications coming forward in the future for student accommodation in the town centre. Just want to remind members that each application is treated on its own merits, as this application has been. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come to members. Councillor Lenny, I believe you have some points to raise, please.
Yeah, while I was going through the agenda and the conditions for this application, I was concerned that there was no protection for the Woodbrook during demolition or construction noted at all. And I'd like an amendment so that there is additional protection of the Woodbrook during demolition, construction and future management of the site. That's from, as much as anything, a pollution point of view. I'd also like to say that there's hard standing around the building, and I didn't know how much of that would be porous enough, or whether the landscaping would help when the flooding starts again. And the only thing that I would like to add is that the heritage is harmed slightly by this building, but it's balanced by public benefit. I don't know about who they mean by public, because I don't see how it would benefit the people who are the public in Loughborough that aren't related to the university. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. In terms of condition, I think it's condition 9, there wouldn't be an objection, I don't believe, to have that amended to ensure that, you know, there's no problems in terms of demolition and construction and impacts on the brook. There is actually a hard standing condition imposed as well, and we can check to ensure that they are permeable if necessary. However, just, you know, we have actually got conditions from the LLFA who deal with drainage, and they are more than satisfied with the application as submitted, subject to those conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question to raise, please. I understand that no cars, if this development goes ahead, no cars are going to be allowed on site from the residents, the people who are going to live there. How is this going to be managed? How's it going to work? If you're a student and you want to have one of these flats, do you then have to sign a guarantee that you won't take a car? And how is this going to be managed, monitored, enforced? Does it mean, in fact, that there will be a warden, concierge type figure on the site 24/7? Please.
Thank you. There is a management plan submitted with the application, and that talks quite explicitly about the parking and how that will be managed. So what happens is before the students move in, they have to sign up and agree that they will not bring their cars to the site. And in fact, I think it extends to Loughborough. So that is an agreement within the management plan. And, you know, that is managed by the team on site. And there will be, there is somebody managing the site 24/7.
Thank you. So what people are going to be asked to do, not only not to bring their cars to the site, but not to bring them to Loughborough.
I would need to check the details, but I'm sure it says in the management plan not to actually bring them into the town centre. There is also a condition that's been requested from County Highways from parking management plan for moving in and out days, so that is covered.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much to the officer for a very full presentation and also for the report that we've received. I was on site this afternoon and I was on, I think it was the second time I've been on site and seen it. I've taken on board what the speakers have said, and I will reserve my right for the moment whether I want to propose any suggestion. However, I've been involved with this council now for over 20 years, and I have seen in the planning committee and on our notices that we get the number of HMOs, and there's always been difficulty. I should say that I have had grandchildren and residents, but none of them have attended Loughborough University. As far as I'm concerned, purpose-built student accommodation that's properly managed with proper facilities and a management agreement benefits the residents of the town far more than HMOs. We went for a walk this afternoon because we were requested to look at the development site and imagine the size of the buildings there. And we went down Forest Road, we went up towards the council offices on the corner there to see the impact that this building could have. And compared to some of the other buildings, but what was interesting was, as you walk down Forest Road, the number of HMOs, the number of little estates off Forest Road that I know contain HMOs, proper family homes. So a purpose-built, if I was an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, so put your imagination hats on people, and I was coming to Loughborough University, I would be delighted to live in somewhere like that, rather than some of the scruffy MHOs we see. And we walk past MHOs today. They're not maintained, they're not well looked after. This, I think, it's more than likely I will propose a recommendation, officer's approval under all the conditions, but I will hold that for the moment. But at the moment, I have to say, better there it is. It's bang slap next to the leisure centre. From various points, they're going to keep the trees as many as possible or rebuild them. At the moment, that is doing nothing, that property. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. Councillor Enfield, please.
Yes, I've got a bit confused with the comments from our head of plans just before we started talking. I'm looking at the figure that shows the extent of the designated Emmanuel Church conservation area, and the development, of course, is within that area. So I'm not sure why Steve Bilbourne was criticised for saying it was in that area. It's obviously not in the adjoining area, the Queen's Park separate area, but it's most clearly in the Emmanuel Church conservation area. So I think we need to clarify that before we can have any meaningful debate about the nature of conservation areas, how they need to be protected, etc. Thank you.
Yep, sorry. So there are two conservation areas here. So the site actually sits in Emmanuel Church Conservation Area, and the Queen's Park Conservation Area is just adjacent across Browns Lane, where the tower is situated.
So, given that we've clarified that, I looked at, what does it mean to be a conservation area? I understand that it's not impossible to have developments in a conservation area, but the requirement is that these developments should enhance the character of the area. Now, I don't see that. I saw a number of arguments posed for balancing damage, admittedly not immense perhaps, but against other things. I wasn't convinced by a number of them, but that's separate, because here I'm asking about the character and quality of the conservation area. We know some mature trees are going to be lost. I'm not convinced that planting saplings is ever a substitute for removing mature trees. We know that habitat is being lost because it will be paying for compensation away from the site. So that means that the site, the conservation area, is being damaged in terms of biodiversity. So again, my understanding is that's not what you're supposed to do to conservation areas. That's why they're conservation areas. And I'm very worried that if we approve a building like this in this area, then we'll be opening up any conservation area to development, however overbearing and damaging. So I very much welcome the views of the plans officer on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I did touch on, the benefits of having all the benefits of this development on the conservation area, I think. We didn't actually mention the enhancement, and that's something that's probably found in the report itself. But, as discussed this evening, officers consider that this site could contribute so much more to the conservation area, and at present, currently it doesn't. And so conservation officers and discussion with myself, we've talked about the reinforcement of the built form along Browns Lane, and providing an active frontage, which is all part of an enhancement of an area. We will see the loss of some trees, but the trees along the brook will be replanted, and that will actually open up that area for more secure walking to the university on that very busy link. Again, they're all enhancements to the conservation area in the view of officers. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I think what we're seeing in this is that all these issues, as one of the speakers mentioned, is going to be very much about interpretation and judgment. And I don't think my judgment at the moment is lining up with those of the officers and those who contributed to the comments on behalf of Charnwood. But let's see where this debate goes, because it's an important development. It'll have a major impact. and I'm sure a lot of other people have a lot of things to say.
Thank you for those comments. We do have the Conservation Area Officer here, and I just wondered if you'd like to offer any further comments on those points, please, Mark.
Can everybody hear me? I suppose there's just one point to make about conservation areas. Conservation areas are a geographical area, and not all features within that area necessarily contribute to the character of that area. So it's important to clearly understand what it is about the conservation, what features in the conservation are important. And I think that's where, in a way, I've arrived at my conclusion, is that actually the features that are important within that conservation area are only impacted on in a minimal way by this development.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Panel. I'm going to move on at this stage because there are several other members that wish to speak. Councillor Monk, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Fryer's comments on HMOs, I agree with her in some respects, but I also disagree. So there's been a lot of emphasis that purpose-built student accommodation reduces the needs of HMOs, but we have yet to see any evidence whatsoever, any data, any stats, any surveys, anything undertaken. Been looking into this, and I understand Sheffield and Norwich have carried out some studies which showed that there is little evidence that the reduction in the use of HMOs, particularly if they're more expensive than a HMO. In my opinion, worked in property for 20 years, a HMO landlord is not going to give up their status of a HMO to convert it to a C3 residential and lose half of their rent and income. It's just not financially feasible for them. Has there been any consultation or survey of students to ascertain the preferred choice of accommodation? Has this ever been carried out? Is purpose-built student accommodation more expensive than a HMO? This emphasis on the reduction of HMOs, bringing family houses back into use, it's just, in my opinion, there's no evidence for it, and I think it should be totally dismissed until we see such evidence. But just my comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Monk.
Just one point, if you wouldn't mind. We talk about HMOs, and I think I can understand that a landlord maybe wouldn't want to give up a HMO for, to go back maybe to a C3 use, which is residential in its completeness. But there needs to be some consideration about freeing up HMOs for local people that do need accommodation. Thank you.
Beg your pardon. Thank you, Ms Walker. I have now Councillor Smidovitz, and then at the moment, Councillor Snort will be my last speaker. So, thank you.
Thank you. I've tried to stay away from the comments on HMOs. So I'll start with the no car parking or no cars to Loughborough. I don't see how this is enforceable, because when we had the Ormbury Gap development, I asked about the cars then, and we were told, well, there'll be a fine. Well, a £50 fine for somebody parking on Park Road or Charnwood Road or Oliver Road, where I live, where we see all the cars coming from those that haven't got parking space. Nothing happens. Nothing happens at all to those cars. I don't think the university would actually get rid of somebody who's a potential first-class honours graduate because they'd bought a car. And the university themselves will not put a no-car ban because they say their students need to work and have a car in order to go to work and from work if they're working night shifts. So I don't accept the no car is a feasible contract at all. We hear about the soft landscaping, and I did ask what all the trees that would be green in the winter. So it's not going to be soft landscaping for 12 months of the year, as far as I can see. I know more trees are going to be planted on the edge of the leisure centre area, but it's still going to be very, very visible. I won't go into the heritage because I think that's been discussed enough. But the cumulative impact of all the, it's harmful, but the less than harmful. But by the time you added up all the less than harmfuls, it becomes quite harmful. So there's a lot more I could say. I have done some research similar to Sarah, but I won't make any comments about that because I think it's early days. But landlords do not want to give up licenses. And if they sell their properties where they're surrounded by HMOs, the ordinary folk in the street will not buy them. And of course, I would love to see them. I would genuinely love to see them returning to be family homes, but the market's gone down. So there is some research that 1 or 2 are returning in London particularly, and I have investigated Loughborough this week purely because of this. I think we're still getting applications in my ward for HMOs. So you see one coming back onto the market, but another landlord will buy it because it's prestigious if they've already got a license, because it doesn't follow the landlord, it seems to follow the house. So unless we can change some of those rules, I don't see how we're going to get houses back.
Thank you, Councillor Swinnerford. I will come now to Councillor Snort, please.
Thank you. Have I got the right one?
Oh, sorry.
Brilliant. Thank you. Just that I'm confused looking through the papers. I think it's because there's 2 lots of papers and it makes it a bit difficult. But I turned to page 43 where I'm looking for the Townscape and Visual Appraisal, TVA, and it's looking at the Council's Conservation Officer, and it's confirmed that the Conservation does not consider the TVA to be an assessment of the heritage asset, and any farm is considered in the heritage statement. Then I turn to page 98 and I look at the Council Landscape Officer, and he's talking again about the TVA assesses, and it says the assessment has a distinct lack of evidence behind it, and baseline experience suggests that the landscape sensitivity should be assessed as medium at minimum. The landscape officer considers the views 1 and 5 have high sensitivity. So I'm at a bit of a loss at the moment to understand whether we should actually take any view from the TVA, or should we actually dismiss it on the actual look what the county landscape officers, the council's land, and also the conservation officer. So if we can clear that up, I should be very grateful. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have got another one as well.
Ms Walker, please.
Yes, the landscape officer has assessed the landscape, a visual assessment. But as you actually read into the report, I mean, some identified harm has been acknowledged, I think, here is what we're saying. But as you read further into the comments made by the landscape officer, they do recommend that the application or the proposal will soften over time and slot into the landscape, Loughborough landscape, which is ever changing at the moment.
And you would like to come back, Councillor?
Could I just ask, should we take notice of the TVA, or should be assessed and the baseline experience as the lack of evidence? So is it something we should take account of, or should we go what the council landscape officer said, there's a distinct lack of evidence?
maybe that's been scripted incorrectly and maybe not expressed as it maybe it should. I think it's what the landscape officer is trying to say here, that the landscape sensitivity should be assessed as a medium. If it was assessed as a medium, which some of the points made in the TVA do suggest that the harm is medium or the sensitivity is medium. So I think we need to consider the TVA and the landscape comments and take a view from there. Thank you.
Can I come back and mention something else? I just wanted to do a little bit on what Councillor Monk was saying about the need for student accommodation. I noticed that the applicant has got information from Benton's within the report. It doesn't actually give you any evidence that that's the case. Do we have any hard evidence that this is happening in terms of when we put student accommodation like this in, that it does release HMOs? Is there any evidence within Loughborough to suggest that?
Through you, Chair, to try and answer this question, to answer it directly, there's no evidence I'm aware of that shows that link. But what we need to do is take a step back and think about the numbers of students that are at Loughborough and that require accommodation during an academic year. As a planning authority, we can't get involved in commercial decisions that developers might wish to make about bringing forward purpose-built student accommodation. But I'm sure that the applicant will tell you that they're not going to bring forward an investment of this nature without being pretty certain about the ability to attract students to take up that space. I mean, it would be a very poor business decision if they try to bring forward something without understanding the market. Now, inevitably, we do know from evidence the proportion of HMOs that there are in Loughborough and the split between the numbers of students in that accommodation as opposed to any other people. We know that the proportion of students, it's not 100%. HMOs is not just about students. There's a very significant proportion of young people and others that occupy HMOs because it is relatively affordable accommodation. If you can't afford to rent a house in its own right, taking up a shared house arrangement in an HMO is a more affordable way of being able to find accommodation. So, lots of people subscribe to this, young professionals, people working at the airport, and for the university and other places in the borough, live in houses of multiple occupation. So it's not just about students. So it seems to me that if there is an increase in purpose-built student accommodation, which is provided specifically for students, that more students will take that up as a choice rather than living in HMOs, thereby freeing up those HMOs for other people who can't afford to rent other forms of accommodation. So it's more about changing the nature of occupation of those HMOs rather than releasing more HMOs to sort of widespread C3 family housing, I'd suggest.
Just a couple of very brief ones, if I may. Do we have any photographs when it's been brought up before by Councillor Midowich? Do we have any photographs that you've kindly put tonight to us in the wintertime?
I don't have any photographs of the wintertime, no.
This is 918 on page 85, which is Emerging Policy H8, which talks about campus purpose-built student accommodation. And at the last bit, it says the policy also seeks to secure financial contributions towards the Loughborough Student Support Scheme. What is that, and why are we not actually supporting it?
I just need to check my report. Bear with me.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Councillor Snott, would you mind just repeating the question? Were you asking whether it references the...
When I look at the conditions and the 106 or whatever, are we talking about an emergency policy, emergency engaged? And it says the policy also seeks to secure financial contributions for the local student support scheme. I'm not sure what the support scheme is, that might be interesting. But also, why we're not actually asking for a contribution.
Thank you, Councillor Snart. We did consult with our internal community officers in regard to this contribution, and it was considered that there was actually no contribution required at the moment. Ordinarily, that type of contribution would go towards maybe further CCTVs and safety within the town centre, but they were, quite firm in their view that there wasn't actually a requirement for contributions for this scheme.
Could I just ask who was that actually said that? Was it officers at Charnwood?
Yeah, I haven't got the name to hand, but it was the community safety group that we also consulted with the Limehurst Avenue application, where at that time there was a need, and so there was a contribution, but there was considered not to be a necessary need for this site.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Snott. Councillor Seaton, please.
Thank you, Chair. I seem to have scribbled notes all over the place, so what I'm saying will be all over the place as well. So the last thing I'll bring up first are the trees in the winter time. Conjures up a lovely view. But we've got Lawson cypress, several cypress trees there, Leylandi cypress, and they're not deciduous. So a lot of those trees there will have leaf during their time. The ones that are going to be removed are going to be replaced, because the ones that are going to be removed are considered to have only 10 years life left. So they're going to be replaced with the younger trees that will grow into the site as well. Right, the next one is the impact on Emmanuel Church. Could I see that? You've got a photograph? No, that one, yes. I think the visual impact on Emmanuel Church will be less than less invasive. So I know it's in the conservation area, but the visual impact will be diminished, minimal, very minimal. I also would like to see viewpoint 8, please. Viewpoint 8. Now, what I do consider to have a visual impact is the cube on the top. It is very distinctive as a cube, and I know there are other developments within Loughborough that have got the brick face. But I think suddenly going from, I'm going to say stucco, but it's not, is it? What's it called? Rendering to that block cube at the top. That is quite impactful on many of the views. So I would comment on that one as being visually impactful on all of the viewpoints there, but not enough to halt this planning application. But I would like the developer to take that on board, and probably it could be softened with the rendering, would make it less impactful, especially on not on a cloudy day, because it would blend in with the skyline. The only way to stop HMOs would be to turn the clock back at least 30 years and not let them turn into HMOs in the first place. They will not be returned to family homes. The financial benefits of a landlord will stop that from happening. So again, that is not a consideration to refuse this application. And I don't think I've got any, oh yes, HMOs. We are blinkered on thinking that HMOs are for students only, and they aren't. There's lots and lots and there's lots of data to say that there's more and more single people now, breakups of marriage or whatever, where single people definitely need to stay in the area because they've got, the children are there, and they need to move into somewhere that's affordable for them. And then probably it is a loss, and I do understand the loss of some of these houses, because they're beautiful houses and they're large, they're so open to being an HMO, and I do really seriously understand. But again, it's not grounds for refusing this application. So therefore, I would like to, and I've not been on the plans for such a long while, I've forgotten the wording now. I would like to go with officer's recommendation and to say that this is positive. Yes, I should have written that down as a speech, shouldn't I? So you get my meaning. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I would like to second that we go with officer's recommendation with all the conditions as laid out in the report.
Sorry, Councillor Seaton, I just need to make it clear what you're proposing, just for the record. So if you can just say what your proposal is, what motion you're tabling for.
Accept.
Sorry.
I would like to accept officer's recommendation that this development gets passed. This proposal gets passed. Have I said all the right words in the wrong order?
So it's just in accordance with the report.
Yes. Yes, and the addendum, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to go along and second that we accept the report and officer's recommendation as in the full report and in the addendums and all the conditions as laid out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. However, I have a councillor who is asking to speak, Councillor Smidovitz, but I am reluctant to allow someone who has spoken twice, whilst there are other members around the table who have not yet spoken. So if you have not yet spoken and would like to do so, I'm giving you that opportunity. Thank you. So Councillor Smidovitz, please, and then I'm going to the vote, please.
I was only going to say, for clarification, we do have a breakdown of the HMOs for students and the HMOs for all others. So we're not all saying it's for students, but we do have a breakdown of where the students live. It might be slightly out of date, but that information was available. So that's just for clarification.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Right, colleagues, we have a proposer and a seconder that we accept officer's recommendation to permit this development to go ahead. See a show of hands of all those in favour, please.
That's 4, Chair.
Right, colleagues. We have not voted to permit. Sorry, Mr. Howard, did you want to come in?
Sorry, Chair, we still need to have, because it is quite possible that the whole committee, the remaining committee, could abstain from voting and it could be carried. So we need to see who's voting against the motion and also who's abstaining as well.
I do beg your pardon. I do beg your pardon. That was my fault. I've taken those who have voted in full. May I see a show of hands of all those against?
That's 4, Chair.
Any abstentions?
1 abstention.
Can I just say that only makes 9 and we should have 10? There's 10 people on the committee.
So the Chair hasn't voted yet, so yeah.
I won't give a mandate to something that doesn't clearly have a mandate. I vote to refuse.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just step in then. So the committee will need to table an alternative motion. I do need to advise committee that if you're going to table an alternative motion, that you need to have clear and convincing reasons. If the motion is to refuse permission, if obviously you don't have clear and convincing reasons and this matter goes to appeal, then you may be exposing the council to an accusation of unreasonable behaviour and a possible costs award. So if any members want to table a motion, they need to set out their reasons to begin with.
Councillor Seaton.
It has been an awful long time since I've sat on planning committee. But the fundamental part of being on the planning committee is to make decisions that may not be palatable to you. And we have to go in the guidelines of the planning application. And there are I've heard people speaking against it, and I can understand why you're speaking against it, but I have not heard any reason why we could refuse this at all. There's not a single reason why this cannot be passed. And what we need now is somebody to come up and we've talked about deciduous trees that are evergreen. We've talked about car parking. We know it doesn't work, but we have to go within those guidelines. We know that students will bring in cars, but we have to go with those guidelines. And that is what the developer is saying, that no cars within Loughborough. You know, there's nothing else we can do except tie the students up when they come into Loughborough, and that is not allowed. So, as I say, I have not heard any reason to turn this application down? Thank you.
Councillor Seaton is quite right. We need to come up, if we are going to turn it down, and this is an enormously difficult application, we have to come up with reasons. We may think that it is, I'm not very good at putting this, it's too large a building for the footprint of the site. We may have serious considerations about the practicality of banning cars from the site. Councillor.
Yeah, from the people who've spoken who have questioned the officers, I think that there's been some quite pertinent questioning, and I think Councillor Infield's final comment was the greatest descriptor of that, and that is that in themselves there are small harms of one type or another running through the conditions and the application, but added together, which is the reason I've made the decision to vote against it, is once you add them all together, it just rolls on and becomes a bigger harm in total. And that is why I have decided that I don't think certainly not in its current the current plan that's been submitted, I do not think that there is enough benefit to anyone other than the developer and the university, quite frankly.
Yes, I want to come back to the fact that this is within a conservation area. And one of the things I said was that developments in such areas must be demonstrated to enhance the character of the area. Now, I don't think that has been done in a convincing way in this plan. And it's because of that, I think that's a primary reason for rejecting the proposal, because I think if you allowed what is a massive and overbearing building, we've heard, at 6 stories, higher than everything else other than the Carillion and the church, but certainly higher than all the other student blocks, then I think there is an issue of potential damage to that conservation area. And that alone, I believe, would be a strong enough reason to reject this proposal. Now, I'm not an expert on planning, so I don't know how that would go down at an argument at an appeal, but I'm sure that case could be made convincingly. And I do worry that if we granted this, which is very impactful in a conservation area, then that would sort of make the term conservation area almost meaningless to me. That's a worry I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've listened to everybody, and as I say, one way or another, I've been involved in planning in this council for over 20 years. Conservation areas are to protect an area. That doesn't mean that you can't have different buildings in a conservation area. Also, it keeps being mentioned that it's 6 stories. It is only part of it that is 6 stories. The rest of it isn't 6 stories. And also, as every committee I've ever sat on in this council on planning, we have to have planning reasons, like it's against NPF 5 or it's this. We can't say people's ideas of what is good design and what's bad. It's very subjective. So that's why we have to go by guidelines. Now, some of the buildings, with the greatest respect, in the conservation areas that have got conservation order on them have no merit whatsoever. And we're looking ahead. and we're not yet. So, but if someone has got, I still stand by that I seconded approval, but I'm willing to listen to anybody that comes up with planning conditions why this has to be refused, that would stand up in an appeal situation, that the officers have to put forward.
Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, again, the sticking point of this seems to be the conservation area. I note that the Charles Zone Conservation Mark's here. Could we just ask him, because I think when he commented in the main debate, he said that there was minimal effect to the conservation area. Could we just potentially just ask him if he's free to just expand on that, so maybe we understand it a little better? Thank you, Chair.
Very good suggestion, please, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I think understand what you're saying about enhancement, but the Act requires either preservation or enhancement. So we need to make that clear. It can be one or the other. In this instance, I think we're looking at some enhancement, particularly of that edge of the conservation area. But the test is that when we're assessing the impact on heritage, we have to go through a staged process. You have to look at what it is that is significant in that area that contributes to the character. And there are a number of things. And in doing that, you have to arrive at an understanding of what that level of harm is, whether there's no harm, whether there's less than substantial harm, or whether there's substantial harm. And if it's less than substantial harm, you have to determine where we're in that scale it sits. So I think you have to be very careful if you're looking to refuse something because it's in a conservation area and you don't clearly identify what elements of that special character it is harming. It's.
When I spoke earlier, I said that one of the things that was demonstrable through the proposal itself, the fact that compensation for biodiversity loss, significant compensation, increased apparently in the revisions, was going to be required, was an indication itself of the damage to biodiversity in the conservation area that would be caused. So I think that's a material planning consideration. Is it not? Am I wrong there?
Can we ask what page that is on? I don't know what biodiversity is. But we're having to pay for something on site.
Yes, that's part of the proposal because of damage to the biodiversity of the site.
Yeah.
It's 8.13 onwards. That's in the update report. Because we have an updated metric, so that's the last position on biodiversity.
Colleagues, we seem to be going around in circles here. It's been suggested to me that we take a break for 10 minutes, that will give people time to take a comfort break, as it's called, and also to gather their thoughts. It's 7:15. Can you all please be back here for 7:30? Thank you. We're going to resume, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. Our Head of Planning and Growth, Richard Benefit, is going to address us to begin this half of the evening. Richard, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we've had quite a debate so far this evening. I think the starting point for me providing advice to you should be the response to some things that Councillor Infield said, particularly starting first with his comments about biodiversity. And I think I'm right in saying, Councillor Infield, but do correct me if I'm wrong, you were saying that one of the harms to the conservation area was the loss of biodiversity on the site, and you're nodding there. So just to talk about that for a moment before I go on to talk about the conservation area, the thing to say is that the loss of biodiversity within the conservation area isn't created because of the biodiversity within it. It's not something which contributes towards what makes the character of that conservation area special. Biodiversity is dealt with separately in the report, and we have to be cautious not to conflate the two things. In this particular instance, the applicant is required to measure the loss of biodiversity on the site and then provide compensation for its loss and indeed provide a net gain. And you can see in the report that that has been secured through the proposed planning obligation to buy habitat units through a habitat bank. So I encourage the committee to put that to one side and deal with that separately to the discussion around conservation areas. And in that context, a conservation area is a designated heritage asset that we do need to be cognizant of and consider very carefully in terms of what the National Planning Policy Framework says about designated heritage assets. And I know my colleague Mark Fennell is poised to provide you more guidance and advice in a moment. But basically, in the National Planning Policy Framework, any harm to a designated heritage asset should require clear and convincing justification if you're minded to grant planning permission for such a use that would cause that harm. I think what we've spoken about in relation to this item from an officer point of view is that our consideration is that there is harm, but it's less than substantial harm. And what that means in terms of the National Planning Policy Framework, it's paragraph 215 for those of you that like to look at these things. Where a development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of the designated heritage asset, that harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including, where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. So I think in the context of the discussion we've been having this evening, a proposal has come forward for a viable use, and we've heard about the impacts that proposal will have on that designated heritage asset. At this point, I'm going to park my explanation, hand you over to Mark, who's going to provide you a bit more guidance about how you assess harm and the differences between less than substantial and substantial and those sorts of things. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So Richard sort of set out that framework. I suppose if I take you through that in a little more detail in terms of the staged approach. So once you've identified the asset, in this instance it's the conservation area, you've got to clearly understand what it is, what the special character is about that conservation area, and what of those special characteristics does this development impact upon. Now, the conservation area character appraisal is there for that purpose. It was an assessment that was undertaken this area. What is the special character of this area? What features contribute to the character of this area? And in my assessment, the features that have the potential to be impacted on by this development are the trees that provide the backdrop to the main thoroughfare of the conservation area, Forest Road, and the glimpsed views of the Carillon Tower. They're the two elements for me that are of this area that we need to consider in terms of the this development and the impact of this development. So, first of all, taking the trees into account, the majority of the trees are to be retained, or the significant trees here are to be retained. So, yes, there will be, some of those trees will get blocked in terms of views from different places, but those trees will be retained. Secondly, in terms of the impact on views of the Carillon Tower, we've already talked about the views along Park Road, and it will impact on the views along Park Road, but only for part of the length of Park Road. So if you imagine Park Road being, it must be over 100 metres in length, as you walk towards the Carillon through the conservation area, at the moment you can see the Carillon for probably 80% of that journey. Once this development goes in, considering the height and also considering the way the massing has been broken up, it's likely that that will reduce by about 20%. So you would still enjoy that walk along that particular area and see the Carillon Tower over the top of the most significant part of the Carillon Tower, which is actually the bell coat, isn't it? The copper bell coat at the top. That's the real distinctive thing about it. You would be able to see it. You also see those glimpse views from elsewhere in the conservation area, which won't be impacted upon. So given the level of harm of those that's derived from those, the impact, the loss of some of the trees, but not all of them, not the significant ones, the fact that some of the trees will be obscured from some of those views, and the Carillon Tower will be obscured from a short length of Park Road in views. My view is that there is harm, but that is less than substantial, and it has to be at the lower end of that. Now, once you've done that, as Richard's explained, there's a requirement to balance the public benefit, and at the moment, the officer's report explains that the public benefit outweighs that harm. So if we're to consider, or if the committee are to consider refusing this application on heritage grounds, they will have to clearly identify what other features and elements within the conservation area are impacted upon and how they are, and then determine, in their instance, that determine a higher level of harm, whether that be a higher level of less than substantial or substantial. Now, substantial in terms of putting it into perspective, substantial is normally the complete loss of an asset. So it would be very difficult to justify in any instance substantial, but less than substantial is that middle ground. There is harm, but it's less than substantial. So the level of harm within that framework of less than substantial would have to be increased quite significantly to turn the planning balance in the opposite direction and justify a reason for refusal.
Thank you for that, Mr. Renault. Councillor Lenny.
When I was making notes from the presentation, it said that there was some harm, but it was less than substantial harm, which is effectively offset by the public benefit, but nobody explained what the public benefit was.
Can I?
Yes, I will come to you.
Okay.
I will come to you, Ms. Walker,
Okay.
but I'm aware that we need to come back to Mr. Bennett. So, Ms. Walker, please.
Sorry, I apologise. I thought you said you were going to Mr. Bennett. There is actually a slide here where we ran through what we consider as officers to be the public benefits that outweighs the lower end of the less than substantial harm, and that they're set out in this slide here. Sorry, I was just showing that they are actually set
Okay.
out. I'm happy
Yeah.
to read through them again, but they are set out on the slides.
Yes.
And they are actually set out in the officer report as well, but I'm happy to work through them again. So we consider as officers, in consultation with the conservation team, that the improvement in the natural surveillance of the widely used pedestrian cycle route to the west of the site that links the town centre and the university and the entrance of the leisure centre. So it's an improvement in terms of public benefit for natural surveillance and safety of the people using that pathway. The delivery of student housing and the potential to free up family homes in the town currently used as HMOs. We've had a lot of discussion around HMOs, obviously freeing up HMOs for the use of, the local community is also a public benefit. Visual improvements to the built environment along Browns Lane. As officers, we consider, again, in consultation with our conservation team, that the site is currently underused, and the landscape will help reinforce, the leafy area of Browns Lane. Promoting, another public benefit would be to promote Loughborough University and its continued provision for economic growth to the town centre in terms of bringing people into the town centre. So the town centre remains a viable shopping place. And activity and footfall to the town centre edge, which at the moment, as on the higher level public benefits, it's considered that this area is underused and it could be fundamentally used better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Walker. Do you want to come back, Joe?
Yes. I think if we're talking about less than substantial harm as regards to heritage, then I would say that those public benefits are less than what we would require from harm to the heritage. And I think most of the speakers today, bar one, did debunk the freeing up family homes that are currently HMOs, and 3 of the other ones only mention students and the university. I don't think that they make up the majority of the public in Charnwood.
Councillor Charles, please.
Thank you, Chair. We seem to be going round and around again and over the same thing. Am I okay to ask? I mean, the Vice Chair of the Planning Committee has said she doesn't feel that that's a suitable reason to pass this application. Is she therefore proposing that that is the reason that she would like to propose that we refuse this application? Because I think we're going around. I think we need to get down to a vote to deal with this democratically. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for that, Councillor Charles. I'll come back to you in a moment. Councillor Enfield. Mr Bennett, did you want to come back?
I will just momentarily, Chair. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a matter for the committee to consider and identify what weight it gives to the public benefits in this balancing exercise. In terms of, does it outweigh the less than substantial harm or not? You've heard from the council's conservation officer, who is, has carefully considered this application and, the harms as he identifies them. He's talked about the glimpse views along Park Road and the impact to some of the trees. We've also identified in the report the public benefits, and the officer's view is that those public benefits do outweigh that less than substantial harm. The harm that's been identified by officers is at the very lower end of less than substantial. Our advice to members is, it is your decision but be very mindful that this is a largely redundant site in the middle of the town centre that could be brought forward for a a good viable use, and it could make a good contribution to the townscape of the town. In my view, it would be very difficult to defend a refusal based on the argument that the public benefits that have been identified will not outweigh the very small amount of less than substantial harm, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Councillor Enfield.
Is a density
What?
consideration?
I'm sorry.
Once again, I think we're in this situation where things are finely balanced. I'm not saying this is a simple and straightforward proposal. And I think it's worth looking at this list of benefits to see if they're credible and substantial or significant enough to offset the negative things that we accept exist with regard to the conservation area. So I'm actually regularly walking along that pedestrian cycle route. I have never seen any incidents there. I've never felt threatened walking along there. I've seen young women and children walking along there at all hours. So I'm not convinced that this natural surveillance is anything real and substantial. If I could be presented with evidence to show that it was absolutely necessary to have this natural surveillance to make the place safe, that might be something, but we've not seen that. I won't go on to the second one because we talked about that enough, and we know there's no evidence to support that particular point. Visual improvements in the form of the built environment along Browns Lane, currently underutilised? Well, yes, underutilised. Whether this large entrance that we saw in the new design is really a visual improvement, I'm not convinced by that. I think that's debatable. And then the latter ones, I think promoting Loughborough University, very debatable. It doesn't need promoting, it does that stuff itself. I don't think another residence block in town to add to the many would actually in any way be promoting it or allowing it to continue its economic growth. So we're left then with activity and footfall. Well, I guess it would add to activity and footfall, but remember the campus is not very far from town centre. I live on a road that is regularly used day and night by students who are walking down to town. So I'm not particularly convinced by the footfall argument either, which leaves that public benefits description looking a little hollow and therefore not very convincing to counterweigh against damage of any sort. Admittedly, I'm not trying to claim that the damage is massive and whatever, although I do think that the views from Queen's Park are just as important to people here as the views of Queen's Park. And then we saw a photo there where I think the impact was significant, even with trees in full leaf. So anyway, that's my point, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Enfield. I have Councillor Smidovitz and Councillor Fryer. Let's not go round in circles. If we could keep, I don't want to quash discussion or anything, but let's be succinct. Councillor Smidovitz, please.
I apologise for interjecting when I didn't hear you actually speaking to start with, so I apologise for that. I would just like to bring your attention to page 88, and part of my formal objection, it would be principle 19.9.3.7. And possibly the points raised under 9.3.5 on page 88.
Councillor Davis, are you suggesting that are you proposing that we refuse on those grounds that it is contrary to, forgive me, that it is contrary to that is on a supplementary planning document, sets out to the council members the very high quality in terms of the persons or principles wanted for are considered to be the most relevant, and they are there on page 88.
Yes, Chair, I don't think it respects and enhances the local character.
Thank you, Chair. So what Councillor Smidovic is talking about here is a different issue to the one of the conservation area and whether there's less than substantial harm and the balance between that harm and the public benefits, and has turned her attention to talking about the scale and mass of the building. And I think I'm right in saying, Councillor Smidovic, you're saying that the scale, mass and height isn't appropriate in terms of respecting and enhancing the local character. That appears to be what you're saying. So do you want to, through you, Chair, elaborate on why you believe that? Because I don't think we've heard that yet so far this evening.
The more we've looked at this design and heard, I mean, I was going to abstain to start with, but the more I heard of the cumulative aspects, I was trying to grasp something that would sum it all up, and it's taken quite a while to find the exact part of what I was trying to put in words, as it were. I didn't want to just say design, but had it been a 3-storey building, fewer properties, and there was amenity for parking, with the trees, not all of the trees being affected, I probably would have put my hand up. But the way it is, and the design as it comes over, and looking at, you know, I've walked around with the others people and thinking about Brown's Lane, I think there's nothing, it's enhancing nothing. It's just not adding to anything. It's a different design, and I know we've got to move on. And at the moment, it's just a mess sitting there. But had that been a large sui generis with lots of trees around it, I'd have been applauding it. But it's just the way it is now. I don't think it respects and enhances the local character. On the contrary.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So but first of all, if we could just deal with the parking issue. In terms of what's proposed at the moment, the local highway authority has no objections to the parking arrangements. Well, that's their professional view. And you know, if we are looking to defend an appeal when the highway authority has no objection on the basis of concerns about parking, then I suggest we wouldn't get very far on that one. But in terms of scale, mass and character, that is something that we can consider. But I think it would be helpful if you could, or perhaps other members, if you are concerned about that, you can elaborate a little bit more so we can understand that, because from our assessment of the design, and again, we've got Mark here this evening, if we need further clarification, that the design is acceptable in terms of the local character of the area. But I do accept that design can be subjective, but yes, if you're able to be a bit more specific.
Well, for the reasons it says, within built-up areas, development proposals should respond positively to their layout of buildings of aligning streets, and in more varied streetscapes. New buildings should contribute towards the visual interest that exists, and I don't think it does contribute to the visual interest. It detracts from it.
Next to the car park and the leisure centre.
I appreciate it's next to a very ugly leisure centre, but when you're looking from parts of the town and approaching, you don't see the leisure centre. It is a blot on the landscape. Perhaps we could plant more trees around that. And that would enhance the amenity of the whole place.
Through you, Chair, perhaps Mark wants to comment on this, but from my perspective of this, and I'm not an expert in urban design, but quite considerable amount of this building is screened behind trees, and there'll be further planting which will further screen it. So you won't get the full sense, in my view, of the mass and scale of this building when it's actually built and the landscaping is matured. And as you've just identified, it is adjacent to a rather interesting design for the leisure centre. So in that context, if an appeal inspector is looking at this, looking at the wider context of the site and the surroundings, judgments will be made about how the juxtaposition of this to other development nearby and the contribution that it makes to the character of the area. So at that point, I'm going to stop and perhaps look to my left to see if Mark can comment any more on the design from an expert view.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose that the thing to consider is that, and as Richard pointed out, really, it's about the context, isn't it? And the context for this building, really, the way it faces out. We've talked about these issues about height and how it might impact on the adjacent streets. But the immediate context for this new building is opposite the leisure centre. It's a well-vegetated location. You have John Storer House, which is a very modern building on the opposite side of the road. So for me, the context to respond to is something modern. However, it's doing something that has got much greater architectural quality. And for me, that's what this building delivers. And part of that is not just the animation of the building, it's the way the blocks are broken up and whatever. So I think it is the right building in the right place in that sense, in terms of design, because of the immediate context. And actually, in that sense, I'm not saying it is enhancing the conservation area, but I think if you look at that context, you look at the leisure centre on one side, you look at John Storer House and the length of Browns Lane, actually, there's an opportunity to introduce a really good building. And I think for me, that's what this does. Chair, could I just come back to an earlier point about natural surveillance? No, I'm fine as long as everybody else can hear me and see me. The issue about natural surveillance, there's a multitude of urban design research to show how important natural surveillance is. It's something that we try to deliver in all our new major developments. It's one of the underpinning principles. But I suppose the document that really highlights it is the Home Office's Secure by Design, which is something that all police constabularies have contributed to, and they see it as a very, very significant issue. I appreciate that the experience of walking along there yourself and experiencing it at certain times of day, as a personal view, that might be it, but there's a lot of research that underpins how important natural surveillance is, and that area does struggle with a lack of natural surveillance.
Councillor Fryer, you're wishing to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'm sorry that once again you've got to listen to me, but this is going on, but never mind. Councillor Smitovich brought to our attention page 88, really 9.35, right the way through. Right, principle 1, respecting and enhancing the local character, and should be appropriate. But if you look at the wording in italics, development proposals should respond positively to the layout of building aligning street, and in more varied streetscapes, new buildings should contribute towards a visual interest. So I take that, considering aspects of design such as differing scales, mass, heights, and the materials used. Now, we've had developments like this around Loughborough that have really been, some have been dreadful, in my personal opinion, the multicoloured one at the back of Sainsbury's car park. We've got the flats on the old factories near the station. So that's that one. 9.38, Principle 4, creating multifunctional, safe and inclusive places. Carry on. Read that whole, I'm not going to read the whole paragraph. 9.39, in terms of the scale of the building, in the original application, it was going to be unit from 4 to 8 stories and 183 units. However, they have gone in discussions, the applicant, it's now varying heights of 3 to 6 stories, so they've knocked off 2 stories, and reduced by nearly 20 units. Now, that's been brought to our attention. I really would like, we're now approaching 8 o'clock and somebody now since 1 o'clock. I really would like some of my colleagues, or 1 or 2 of my colleagues, to put forward a proposal on planning grounds that we can defend wherever it goes on this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. Councillor O'Neill, please.
Thank you. I'm finding it very difficult to speak about this development because there are some aspects of it which I think are quite good for all the reasons that have been mentioned. But actually the impact on the local community I think is quite negative. I actually quite like the flats in this Sainsbury's. I think they're really nice and colourful and modern and remind me of Copenhagen, actually. I quite like them. In terms of the design of the current proposal, I think Councillor Seaton's point about the use of brick on that sticky out bit was quite important. So if there's a possibility for them to sort of say, well, we could redesign it and make them less impactful, I think that would have some effect on my vote. I think the point here is there are, and I think Councillor, I'm not very good after 9 o'clock. It's not even 9 o'clock yet. Councillor Lenny made the point that there are lots of small things about this which really I don't like, and they add up to me not voting for it. But the point that Mr. Bennett has made, none of them, unfortunately, actually could stand up at an appeal. And other than that, I haven't got any thoughts about it at all. Other than that, I've actually learnt an awful lot about conservation areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on the point you were making about the materials you're talking about, and I know Councillor Seaton mentioned earlier that block. We do actually propose a condition 3, which says, notwithstanding what they've submitted so far on the application in terms of materials, that the external materials, they will need to submit further details for our approval. So there is some control there that we've got around that to potentially seek materials which soften better in the the relationship between the building and the sky, for example, which is a point Councillor Seaton raised.
So to follow up on my last point, I don't like this proposal, but as Mr. Bennett has said, all the things that I don't like about it wouldn't stand up at an appeal. So would it be, given that limitation, would it be useful to think about that and then reconsider how we're going to vote?
I think you have. I will come back to you, Councillor Seaton. I'm sorry. Can you give me a little clarification, Councillor Hill? I don't quite follow what you're suggesting.
Sorry.
You were just going to think about it.
I was going to think about it. I think that if if we had chance to go away and consider our vote, in the light of what Mr. Bennett said, maybe some of the people who vote against it might abstain. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you. In view of there not being any other proposal on the table so far, I would like to reiterate, and I'm not going through those words again, my original proposal and highlight the cube brick part of the conditions that are going to be there, the materials being used, etc., that could be pointed out when the materials are considered. So, as I say, my proposal on the table is to accept officers' recommendations and pass this building.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Can we actually vote again on the same actual proposal?
I think there has to be an alternative proposal. You've had a proposal to grant, voted down. Someone needs to table an alternative motion. That then needs to find a seconder and be voted on. If that's voted down, then you can return to the original motion.
Right, we'll take the vote again. We all know what we're voting for. Did you want to speak?
Sorry, Chair. I think
Can we all stop speaking at once?
members need to be invited to table an alternative motion. And if that finds a seconder, then obviously that will need to be voted upon. If it falls, then we can go back to the original motion and vote on it again. But it's the onus is on members now to come up with an alternative motion. If you're not able to come up with an alternative motion, then we will have to return to the original motion and vote on it again.
Councillor Stark.
Just for clarity, could we, about the cube that we were talking about, can we put that in some sort of way that you do that so it's actually in writing and we don't actually miss it?
Through you, Chair, the condition 3, I think, is what you're looking for, Councillor Snart. That already sets out the, notwithstanding the plans that they've submitted already, a requirement for them to submit to the local planning authority for agreement details of external construction detailing of all key elements, including, and there's a list A to O of the features that they need to provide details of in terms of external construction detailing. So we can construction details and features materials.
Chair, would that substantially alter the proposal? So I could say that's another proposal.
So the conditions will be there.
Yeah,
unless you're going to amend the conditions somewhere.
Through you, Chair, I think we could amend condition 3 to make specific reference to the cube. And I think we could do that if that would help members. I'm going to look to my learned friend on the end of the row here to see if that is enough to amount to a substantial change in the motion.
I think it would. I mean, if you're going to amend the condition because you have concerns about the appearance of the building and you want to ensure that the appearance will be, the materials used will obviously ensure the appearance. It's getting really late. I'm losing my will to live, to be honest with you. But if you're going to amend the condition to ensure that the impact of the appearance of the building is more, it meets your concerns, then that would obviously change the motion. Yeah.
Thank you. Therefore, Chair, I would like to go with my original proposal to accept officers' recommendations, but to highlight a condition that the cube be treated more sensitively to the surroundings and benefit and blend more into the natural environment. There you go. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, perhaps amendments to condition 3 to include reference to the queue to see how it can achieve those ends you've just mentioned. Would that be satisfactory?
We have an amended proposal to accept officer's recommendation. So may I see a show of hands, please? All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4.
All those against? All those abstaining?
1, 2, 3, 4. 5.
It's abstaining.
The motion is carried 4 votes to 0 because of the abstentions. Sorry, I do correct that. 4 votes to 1.
Thank you very much for your help. Thank you. Colleagues, final item on the agenda this evening, item 6, list of applications determined under delegated powers. We have it in front of us. Does anyone on the committee have any questions or comments? David, Councillor Storm, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's not on that, it's on the to take any further action for the enforcement. And I just wanted to run through with officers, if I may, the one on Greevy Lane, Newtown for erection of a fence. This has caused some distress with the neighbours, and it is a fence that's quite a considerable height. I think it's about 2 metres, right across the front. And I thought planning permission was needed to actually put a big fence out of character with the area up. So just for guidance, and so I can tell the neighbours. I've had some information back from enforcement, but it didn't tend to say that we should have planning permission and we were going to enforce it. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, if I may. I don't have the particular details of this application in front of me, Councillor Snart. You did say that you had made some inquiries the enforcement team. I think if you look at the report, it does say that there is harm, and it's scored at level 3, and the harm ratings are set out in the enforcement policy, so you can understand from that why it's been rated at 3. I think at the end of the day, whilst planning permission is required, in this instance, it's not considered expedient to take enforcement action to have that removed. The reasons will be set out in the officer report, which we don't have in front of us today, but we can unite you with a copy of that report if you want to know more about it. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll take that away with me and speak to the team leader of enforcement and get that to you.
I have got some information from them. It's just that I don't understand why we don't actually say planning permission is necessary for something that is not in the street scene and it's larger than it should be. That's what I don't understand. So I understand what you've done, but I don't understand why we're not actually saying you need planning permission for that.
Councillor Corey-Leslie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one, and I appreciate you might not have the information here. It's also a question on item 6. I was just interested to know enforcement item E220350 on page 150. It says cases where action has been taken. Could we get some clarification of what that action is? What's the extent of it? Thank you.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Which one was that, Councillor? You're referring to King's Farm, Narrow Lane, Wimeswold. So item 2 on the agenda is where action has been taken. So again, if you would like to know more about that, then I can unite you with that report as well, if that would be helpful.
I would be interested to know. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Through you, Chair, enforcement cases aren't on the public file, no, because there may be factors within the enforcement case that we need to rely on in a court. So they're privileged. So whilst they're available to all members to look at, particularly ward council, for those ward councillors where it falls in their patch, but also as a member of the plans committee, you're able to ask to see the file if you wish to do so. So that's why they're not published in full in this report.
Anyone else?
We moved on to the whole list now.
Yeah.
Through you, Chair, Councillor Smidovic, I don't have the information in front of me, but you are able to look at that officer report on the planning file and view for yourself the officer's reasons for refusal.
Yeah, I don't know who the officer was.
Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you.
Wait.
I'll tell you what, make an update.
I'm closing the meeting at 8:20. Saying it's been a very difficult meeting. Thank you all. And I'll see you in August. Bye.